Data commentary, language to describe movement and change. Introduction. When describing data, it's important to use a variety of verbs. They can describe a neutral change, upward movement, downward movement, or horizontal movement. How would you categorize the following verbs? How many did you get correct? The verbs to describe upward movement are to increase, to rise, to grow. The verbs to describe downward movement are to drop, to fall, and to decline. The verbs to describe horizontal movement are to plateau, to level off, to stay the same, and to remain the same. The verbs to describe neutral movement are to change, to shift, to move. Grammar point number 1. Notice how these verbs are used in a sentence. In a verb pattern sentence, you have a subject plus a verb or verbs plus a complete idea. For example, the number of full-time professors fell in 2003. Sales rose in October. Pollution levels plateaued in the mid-1990s. Voter absenteeism shifted after the Rock the Vote campaign. Look at these verbs again, but change the word class. What is the noun form? How many did you get correct? The upward verb, to increase, becomes an increase. To rise becomes a rise. To grow becomes a growth. For the downward verbs, to drop becomes a drop. To fall becomes a fall. And to decline becomes a decline. For the horizontal verbs, to plateau becomes a plateau. To level off becomes a leveling off. Notice the spelling difference between the United Kingdom and the United States. In the verb form to stay or remain the same, there is no noun form possible. For the neutral verbs, to change becomes a change. To shift becomes a shift, and to move becomes a movement or a move. Note, as you saw on the previous slide, some verbs cannot be changed to a noun. For example, to stay the same. We can use this in a verb pattern sentence. University students' free time stayed the same throughout the semester. However, we cannot use it as a noun pattern. There was a staying the same of university students' free time throughout the semester would not make sense. For the example to go up or to go down, we can use the verb pattern sentence. Their calorie intake went up during the winter months. However, we cannot use it in a noun pattern sentence. There was a going up in calorie intake during the winter months would not make sense. Grammar point number 2. Notice how these nouns are used in a sentence. In a noun pattern sentence, there was plus a noun plus a complete idea. For example, there was a fall in the number of full-time professors in 2003. There was a rise in sales in October. There was a plateau in pollution levels in the mid-1990s. There was a shift in voter absenteeism after the Rock the Vote campaign. How would you change these sentences from a verb pattern to a noun pattern? Were your sentences correct? In the verb pattern, we have 2 examples. Market share increased in 2017. Funding for archaeological projects declined last year. Both of these can be in the noun pattern. There was an increase in market share in 2017. There was a decline in funding for archaeological projects last year. Complete the paragraph using the data in the bar graph below. You will need both verbs and nouns. Here are some possible answers. Remember that many verbs and nouns can express the idea. In the first 2 months of 2016, sales remained the same at $9 million. However, there was a decline the following month. Sales increased in April and May, but plateaued in June and July. There was another rise in sales in August, but it leveled off in September. Although sales went up in October, they dropped substantially in November and ended the year at $4 million. Grammar point number 3. We often use adverbs and adjectives to provide more information about the size of a change or the rate at which it occurs. Look at the examples below. Adverbs. Although sales went up in October, they dropped substantially in November. Adjective. Although sales went up in October, there was a substantial drop in November. Note that adverbs are used with the verb pattern sentences and go after the verb. Adjectives are used when the noun pattern sentences and go before the noun. Here are a few more adjectives and adverbs that can be used, yet there are many others. Adjectives: surprising, a surprising drop. Rapid, a rapid growth. Slight, a slight climb. All of these can be changed into the adverb form. Surprisingly, dropped surprisingly. Rapidly, grew rapidly. And slightly, climbed slightly. Grammar point number 4, prepositions. Pay attention to the use of prepositions when describing change. Here are a few examples. The first 4 are related to numbers, and the second 3 are related to time or period. From, to. Sales climbed from 2,000 to 8,000 units in 2017. To. The Dolphin Pod grew to 12 members. By. The average increased by 10%. At. The percentage of infected specimens leveled off at 37. In. Interest in gym memberships peaked in January. During. Commute times increased during the first 5 days of the holiday season. Throughout. Temperature fluctuated throughout the summer months. Grammar point number 5, comparisons. A final way to talk about change is to use comparisons. Check out these examples. Typing speed was faster in the morning than in the afternoon. Fewer boys than girls reported that their parents decided their curfew. More cars were sold in Bogota than in Cali. Almost twice as many women as men reported discrimination. A larger percentage of pianists favored a Steinway over a Yamaha piano. Nearly the same number of Colombians and non-Colombians replied yes. 4 times as many engineering students achieved high math scores compared to history students.